Hey everyone, my name is Jason Marks. I'm the founder and CEO of CartilaGen. I'm also a graduate student at the University of Iowa. Specifically, I'm a PhD candidate in biomedical engineering. And this summer, I'm participating in the graduate version of the Hawkeye Startup Accelerator. So I'm here today to tell you a little bit about how CartilaGen is able to kind of change the paradigm for osteoarthritis care. So you've probably heard of osteoarthritis in one form or another. You might have it. You probably know of someone that has it. It's a pretty crippling disease. Essentially, what happens is you have some smooth cartilage that's on the ends of your bones at joints. Over time, that smooth surface can kind of wear down, exposing the underlying bone. And when that happens, when you use your joints, your bones rub together, and this causes symptoms of pain, swelling, and loss of motion within the joint. Ultimately, like I said, can be very crippling. Um, so bad that actually the CDC says that osteoarthritis is, in fact, the leading cause of disability of adults in the United States. To kind of quantify that, osteoarthritis affects nearly 23% of all adults in the United States. And specifically, CartilaGen is looking to target post-traumatic osteoarthritis, where it's a specific, more aggressive form of the disease that occurs within a few years after a traumatic joint injury. Post-traumatic osteoarthritis accounts for 12% of all um, arthritis cases within the U.S. Uh, Currently, there's a fairly broad therapeutic landscape that's used by care providers. But everything here is entirely just targeting the symptoms of the disease. Nothing can actually modulate the disease itself. So whether that's oral medications or different types of joint injections or even terminal kind of joint replacements, um, no approved treatment that's currently available in the market for osteoarthritis is actually disease modifying. Everything that's currently available can only address the symptoms. There's nothing that can actually prevent or treat the disease itself. Um, this kind of problem is really validated within the community. Last year at the osteo or the Orthopedics Research Society convention, I got to meet a world leader in osteoarthritis and talk to him about this problem. And he really said there's a great need for a better preventative treatment as current methods are not predictable and most people cannot get good results. Uh, so how can CartilaGen address this problem? Well, our frontline product is a technology that was developed at the University of Iowa. What it is it's a routine intra-articular injection. So that means that it's just an injection straight into the joint cavity of a small molecule drug after a traumatic injury to prevent osteoarthritis. So the reason this is a big deal is because we're a first mover that's able to fulfill a major unmet medical need. A little bit more about our solution. Essentially what it is it's two components. We have a small molecule drug as one component, which is currently actually used by clinicians for other indications. And then we have essentially a hydrogel vehicle, which allows for localized delivery of this drug into the joints. And those together are CartilaGen's novel solution to this problem. We have a targeted delivery of a disease-modifying therapy. Both of these components are patented, and we have a really strong group in Minneapolis who manages our intellectual property portfolio. So how do we know that this solution works? Well, we've got really strong preclinical data to back this up. At the University of Iowa, this product was proven in a large clinically relevant animal model, and the results were published in a top translational journal, Science Translational Medicine, back in 2018. Essentially, I like to show one kind of figure just to show that this works. Essentially, if you see more pink in the image in the bottom right, that's showing that you have healthy cartilage, whereas less pink is more indicative of injured or diseased cartilage. So we showed that if you inject this solution into a joint after an injury, we can effectively prevent any disease-related degeneration of cartilage. We've also completed some independent CRO, so that's contract research organization studies related to toxicology and pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. And we got really, really great results. It essentially showed that our product is highly safe, and that shouldn't be a concern for us moving forward. So what does this look like in terms of a market in the United States? I've provided some annualized data here. So let's start on the far right, specifically. The osteoarthritis and companion animal osteoarthritis would be kind of our total addressable market. It's a very large market. Healthcare costs over $100 billion a year, and that's a combination of direct medical expenditures, but also lost earnings because of the lack of suboptimal treatments for this disease. Um, then from there, our kind of serviceable addressable market would be specifically, like I said at the beginning, post-traumatic osteoarthritis, because we're looking to inject this drug product immediately after a joint injury. And then our serviceable attainable market is something a little bit smart first, because we want to start really targeted as we progress through the FDA process. So we'll be looking at specifically fracture-induced post-traumatic osteoarthritis. There's several key injuries that are well characterized to develop into post-traumatic osteoarthritis, and intra-articular fractures are one of them. So we want to build on our really strong preclinical data and look to prove this clinically. So yeah, we'll be targeting fracture-induced post-traumatic osteoarthritis as our first market. I talked a little bit about what other therapeutics are used in this space currently, but I kind of want to summarize that here. So everything on the far right is what's currently used. I mentioned there's different types of oral pain relievers that are used. You have your NSAIDs like Advil, Aleve. You have other pain relievers like Tylenol, which has acetaminophen, or even different types of opioids. There's multiple types of intra-articular injections, whether they're viscosupplemental, which means that you're just injecting a lubricant into the joint, or you're injecting a steroid. And then there's also those joint replacement surgeries. So furthermore, essentially, CartilaGen's product is the only one that kind of meets all of the key attributes that you would look for in a good therapeutic. You want to have high efficacy, it's easy to use, it's safe. It has a disease-modifying effect, which is very critical in this case, and that it would be low cost. How would we look to market this? So specifically, I'll talk to the U.S. human market, and this is assuming that there's no exit to an existing player. Essentially, what this would look like is we'd market to orthopedic and sports medicine physicians, because they're the ones, even if patients want the therapies, it's going to have to be the clinicians that are the ones that decide, okay, yep, we'll give it to them, and that they want to use it for their patients. You would market to them. Our purchasers would meet with kind of the hospital purchasers would meet with orthopedic sales representatives. You can either do that direct or indirect, but we would choose indirect until we had a pipeline that would merit direct sales. And then our revenue stream would essentially come from a pre-prepared kit that we'd sell in bulk quantities. Essentially, it would have this small molecule drug in a hydrogel and a lyophilized, which kind of essentially just means it's a powder form, which then if you reconstitute that, you can have a sterile injection at point of contact. So we've got some tangible future directions. We've got our FDA IND submission imminent. IND essentially stands for Investigational New Drug. This is something that has to be complete and on file with the FDA in order to initiate a human clinical trial. So that's something that we're rapidly approaching a submission for. That being said, we've got our initial kind of FDA human studies funded and scheduled to begin this summer. It's a phase 1/2A trial from a $2 million Department of Defense grant. It's going to be enrolling 66 patients between the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics and the Indiana University Health System. And concurrently, we've got a NIH phase 1 SBIR review, and that's looking to kind of expand CartilaGen's intellectual property portfolio and trying to expand that serviceable, obtainable market. And we've got some key clinical trial partners key partners for this clinical trial, including the Department of Defense and the University of Iowa and Indiana University.
Okay,
Additionally,
Jason,
we have some.
Jason,
Yeah.
it's been over 6 minutes, so wrap it up in the next 30 seconds.
Oh, my bad. I guess I didn't realize it was a 6-minute presentation. My bad. Yeah, so we've got a few key strategic partners to kind of help us look to commercialize this product, notably the Department of Defense, who would serve as our first customer, the Arthritis Foundation, who kind of would help us acquire new customers. Right now, the core management team is just myself, but I've got I'm heavy into a recruitment phase right now. I've got a few prospective candidates identified. I'm happy to be supported by a strong scientific advisory board, including a key opinion leader and a strong advisory team as well. So, in summary, CartilaGen has kind of the only solution that can effectively target the earliest stage of PTOA development by preventing the underlying disease mechanism in an easily performed and cost-effective manner. So, thanks for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or you can connect with me at my email listed here.
All right. Any questions?
Hey, Jason, I do have a question. That's
Yeah,
presentation, by the way. So
thanks.
is the injection a one-time thing, or is that something that's ongoing following the patient's recovery?
Yeah, so all the data that we have so far suggests that you would just need kind of one injection. However, this is certainly something that I want to explore and the university wants to explore further. So we will be doing some additional research studies to really determine whether there could be a benefit from additional injections or not. Good question.
And so just like my internet broke up. So this is preventing, like this is right after the trauma. This isn't for somebody that already has
Correct.
like after, like a couple of years later.
Mhm.
Is it something that could be like addressed later? Like, do you think this is something that could say, hey, I've had, arthritis for a couple of years? Like, I mean, I know you're still getting into the trials and things like that, but could this help somebody like later on, or is it only gonna like say you smash your knee up?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, so that's a difficult question to answer now because all of the research so far has really been on that post-trauma case, but there certainly could be applications to somebody that you like how you described who's had arthritis for a couple of years. So at the time, I would be hesitant to say yes, but I would be encouraged to at least do some additional research into that area to kind of see whether or not there really could be a benefit.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Jason, what does that Matter company refer to? MATTER.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, so Matter is kind of an incubator, that's healthcare incubator based out of Chicago. They've got a couple, I think 100 or more portfolio companies. So it's similar to kind of some of the programs that we have in the corridor and whatnot. But it's you can access kind of the reason I joined is so I could access a broader network. I essentially do it remote because you don't have to have a physical presence in Chicago. So it was really about expanding my network.
Any other questions?
I guess I have one last one. What's the time frame for this injection after the trauma? Is there like what's the window on getting this before it's quote unquote too late?
Yeah. So again, that's a difficult question to answer, but I can speak it right now at least to what we've got scheduled for our clinical trial. So the clinical trial will be recruiting specifically people who have just broken their ankle. Essentially, the way this will work is somebody unfortunately breaks their ankle, and then we say within a day we want to enroll them into the clinical trial, and through the normal fixation process where the orthopedic surgeon would repair their ankle, they would just receive this single injection right alongside that current standard of care. So it'd be really short term after a joint injury like this. But that's just our initial kind of indication as for now. Since we've got kind of a long road ahead and trying to push this through the FDA, we got to start really narrow and look to get approval for one indication, and then we can look to go more broad from there.
Right. Like, but just, I mean, are you hoping that eventually it's, hey, you got a couple days to,
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but thankfully for this first indication, we feel pretty good about the timeline that we have now, because if somebody breaks their ankle, I think it's pretty unlikely they're just going to sit on that for a couple days and say, "Oh, I'll get that looked at next week or something." I think more than likely they're probably just going to head straight to the emergency room and start getting that treated.
Right, right. But I was just thinking of, instead of like breaking their ankle, like they have a really bad sprain and they just think they can,
Yeah.
walk it off for a couple days. Usually, if it's, they always tell you, hey, let it rest for 24 hours versus like for a sprain or something like that, that could cause that trauma as well. So,
Oh yeah, that's definitely something I've thought of before. So lots of things I want to explore in the future.
yeah, so that's great to hear.
Hey, Jason, this is David. Thanks
Hey.
for being here. Could you go over the timeline from when this idea began to where you are now? Like,
Oh yeah,
how long was that? And,
yeah. So
like, maybe a couple of the biggest challenges you've faced so far.
Yeah. So I will say that here's what I'll say. I picked this up pretty late in the preclinical development process. This project has been entirely completed so far at the University of Iowa. Essentially, so what I mean is all the preclinical research that was done has been at the University of Iowa. It's been since day one sponsored by the Department of Defense, and you might wonder why that is. And the reason for it is because within their population, the number one leading cause of discharge for a soldier from the military is actually post-traumatic osteoarthritis. So within their population, this represents a huge growth opportunity. So they realized this years back, and they knew that the University of Iowa had a really good arthritis research program going on the west side of campus. So back around 2010, this project actually started. The Department of Defense at that time had given a couple $1 million to the Department of Orthopedics to kind of do some initial proof of concept studies. Those went well, and over the last 10 years or so, this kind of has developed into the product that we have now. That's supported by, I would say, over $15 million of Department of Defense funding to date. And so it's a really long preclinical process where you have to essentially kind of do some bench level tests, then you kind of move into a small animal model, and then ultimately a large animal model. And those studies can take years at a time, especially with a disease like arthritis, where it's very different than COVID. COVID, in a few days if you've got it, whereas post-traumatic osteoarthritis, even that's an aggressive form of the disease, and you won't even know for a year or more that you might be symptomatic. So with that said, it's a really long development process. But essentially, once we've kind of proved this in a large animal model, as I indicated before, that's about the time that I picked up the license from the University of Iowa and kind of started to move this forward. The Department of Defense, thankfully, because they have such a large interest in this product, they essentially reached out to the University of Iowa specifically and said, "Hey, this is something we really want. We want to continue to move this forward." So they gave essentially another $10 million to the University of Iowa, a quarter of which is going towards this initial clinical trial that I mentioned, and the rest is going towards continued R&D. So it's been a long road so far, and I think the most challenging thing to date has been really trying all around the IND submission to the FDA. And preparing for a clinical trial, since I don't have that background. I've not commercialized a new drug product before, and this is pretty new for the Department of Orthopedics at the University of Iowa as well. So I would say that would be the most challenging thing so far.
So you came on a couple of years ago?
Yep. Yeah.
And why did you sign on to this program?
Well, so at the top, I guess that there's a longer story involved there, but essentially I came to the University of Iowa specifically because when I say I came, I'm talking about when I came for undergrad, because I've been in Iowa City for the last 9 years, both through undergrad and grad school. And the reason I came there is because I wanted to do some sort of research into osteoarthritis, and I really wanted to have an impact in that space. I always felt like I was going to go to medical school, or that was always my plan. But that changed once we kind of got some really strong preclinical data here. And one of the kind of leaders in the Department of Orthopedics approached me and asked if I had any interest in getting the license for this technology and looking to try and take my career in the commercialization direction instead of the traditional medical school route. And I ultimately, here I am. That's what I decided. And I guess one of the reasons that really drove me in that direction was the idea that if I'm able to kind of have an impact by successfully commercializing this product, I'm really encouraged by the thought that I can help people that I might not ever even meet. Because if I can get this into the market, I can help people that have these kinds of injuries all across the country, and I don't have to be physically in that spot, in that one place, one time to help them. So that's something that really encourages me to and drives me to move this forward. That's kind of why I got involved with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're kind of going off of timeline. What's your future timeline looking like? I mean, I know this is on the scale of multiple years.
Yeah.
What's your plan for the next 5 to 10 years with this?
Yeah. So yeah, it's obviously very subjective. Of course, it's especially it's going to be based heavily on our first clinical trial results. But this clinical trial, I'm estimating that'll take about 3 years to complete once it gets started. It'll take about a half a year to a year to enroll all 66 patients, and then we're going to follow every patient up through 2 years post-injury. So really rough ballpark, 3 years for this clinical trial. A little bit about the FDA process. You typically have to do a phase 1 trial, a phase 2 trial, a phase 3 trial. Thankfully, we're following more of an accelerated approval pathway. So we would only need 2 at this moment. So the next thing after that would be a phase 2b/3 trial, where instead of 66 patients at 2 centers, we're going to be enrolling a couple hundred patients at, say, 50 centers across the country. The enrollment for that might take longer, so maybe a year and a half or maybe even up to a year and a half or 2 years. And then that's also would be another kind of 2-year follow-up. At least that's the idea right now. So I'll very heavily, the next few years is going to be all clinical trials. My kind of ballpark right now is that maybe in about 7 years, we could apply for market approval. And then from there, I would probably look to exit to an existing key player in the space. So yeah, it's a long runway ahead, but yeah, but I'm here for it. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Yeah, and if anybody thinks of any questions later, feel free to reach out at my email. I'm happy to talk at any time.
Hey, Jason, Ricardo
Hey.
here. I love the name CartilaGen. What does that mean, and how did you come up with that?
Yeah, so I came up with it, and there was a couple ideas that I had in mind how I settle on this name. I know a lot of kind of biotech companies have some sort of like gen piece in their name. There's Biogen, Amgen, Genentech. That's a kind of a key little piece in a lot of names. And since kind of what my space is kind of related to cartilage, I'm like, oh, you can kind of almost blend those words kind of nicely. And interestingly enough, back when I was starting this company, I was talking with the research foundation about getting another license to a different piece of intellectual property that was around regenerating cartilage. So at the time I was like, oh, wow, this would work out really well. I didn't end up taking that intellectual property, but I really liked the name, and I think it fits really well for the space I'm in. So that's why I kept it, and here we are. I appreciate the comment though.
Anyone else? If not, I'll ask our traditional final question. What can we as the community do to help you?
Yeah, so I think my answer might be similar to Twee's answer. So like I said, I'm currently kind of undergoing a nationwide kind of talent search to find some key employees that I could put around me. And so with that in mind, if after listening to my presentation, not necessarily immediately, but if say someone strikes you the next week or the next month or something like, oh, I remember I listened to Jason's presentation. I know this person. Maybe it would be good for them to have a conversation. The one thing I would say is I would really appreciate if you reach out and made that connection. I'm really looking to try and grow my network as broad as possible, and I think this is getting to expand it in this way would be really beneficial for me. So I would greatly appreciate any kind of connections you might have.